dialogue and discuss. Thanks, Vicki, for hosting this. So we will get started. So welcome, everybody. This is a collaboration, actually really between 3 departments. So Be Well, Employee Wellness, CETO, Center for Excellence in Teaching and Academic Leadership. So thank you to Vicki and Jessica so much for hosting, and for CETO for partnering. And then also psychology and counseling here at UCA. We've got Dr. Kevin Rowell. He'll go by Kevin today. And Kevin and I will be tag teaming. I'm going to start us off here, but then really Kevin's going to be leading us for the most part after that. So this is faculty mental well-being. We're focusing on demonstrating care for colleagues, but some very specific strategies in ways to do that. And before I get started, I don't want to forget to say, and I didn't introduce myself either. I'm Mariah Bruner, Wellness Coordinator. I know a lot of you, but I'm not sure I've met everyone. So it's good to see you all. I wanted to say that if you are a Be Well participant and you want to get points for this session, you can just take a screen grab or snip or a photo on your cell phone if you use that mobile app. It's really handy. And you can load that up, use that category, Be Well education sessions. That'll get you your 5 points. If that doesn't make any sense to you, you can also email me. I'll include my email at the end, and I could get you a little certificate of attendance. We're not picky about that. So just keep that in mind. You can definitely get your points for today. And I always like to share learning objectives. These are really more to keep me on track more than anything. But today we're going to review employee mental health data. I've got some interesting statistics to show. We're going to explore what I call the notice, ask, refer model. Kevin's probably going to use a little bit different wording, but just there's just kind of this 3-step process, and we'll talk about that. And then we're going to just dialogue and open up and discuss strategies to demonstrate compassion and empathy to our colleagues, and just some ground rules on that. I think it's important to remind everybody that when we are dialoguing and discussing, that we are not using any particular names of any other employees. We don't want this to be a forum for talking about very specific, very confidential situations. We can talk in hypotheticals. We can absolutely do that. But just a reminder about that we want this to be a safe space. And if you've attended one of my faculty wellness webinars before, you've seen this graphic, and I like showing it every time we talk about faculty wellness, because I think it's really important to remember sort of why we're all here and then why our wellness is important. So just a reminder that an investment in your well-being as a faculty member is important for you as the individual. It's important for your colleagues. It's important for your students. And it's important for the campus overall. And so this topic plays right into that again, is we want to be looking out for our own mental health, but also supporting the mental health of our colleagues. So again, just a nice reminder to kind of get us in the right mindset for this discussion. So like I mentioned, I'm just going to go over just a few data points that I think, again, help frame this session and why this is so important to talk about specifically here at UCA. So I'm going to show some data. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew it's aggregate, it's de-identified, it does include faculty and staff. And I also wanted to reiterate that in my position, I work with aggregate and de-identified data. So I'm not seeing who goes to EAP. I'm not seeing who marks on a survey that they have mental health concerns. That is all anonymous. So I just wanted to reassure everybody that I'm still very much working in a confidential space and keeping privacy really at the forefront. So I wanted to share our Employee Assistance Program, or our EAP. This is some utilization data from fiscal year 21 that ended in June, and common presenting concerns. Just thought this was interesting. A lot of people don't know a whole lot about our Employee Assistance Program. I will talk more about it at the end. I will share that resource for everybody that's curious, but we offer short-term counseling and crisis intervention at no cost to benefits eligible employees and their family members. And in fiscal year 21, we had 163 counseling sessions with our EAP service. And the top presenting concerns were anxiety, stress, marital partner issues, depression, and major grief and loss. I don't think anything is particularly surprising considering the last 20 months or so dealing with COVID, especially seeing that grief and major loss category pop up in that top 5. But again, it's just interesting kind of to know what our colleagues are going through. And again, in an anonymous way, kind of an overview level, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that. And then this is some data that I gathered from a health risk assessment, or I'm sorry, from the health risk assessment survey. We do this every year as part of our Be Well program, our premium incentive. You do a biometric screening and then you take this health risk assessment survey. And again, I don't see anybody's individual results. I don't see, John Smith got this, this, and this on his health score. I just see whether or not it's been completed. And then I get this aggregate report. It's very insight. It provides a lot of insight into what's going on with our employees. So we had 610 employees fill this out this year, and 29% self-reported feeling depressed or anxious. That's really high. If you do the numbers, that's 177 employees out of that 610 that are self-reporting that. And then also on average daily stress level, we're seeing 73% say that they're experiencing some, 18% a lot of daily stress, and then 3% are completely feeling overwhelmed. So I just thought I'd leave that with you for a moment. I'll ponder that. And then this is, I find kind of one of the most interesting things, just timely topics, COVID in particular. So we did a very extensive assessment and survey this fall. It was really to assess satisfaction with the Be Well program and employee wellness in general, but also assess needs and health and well-being needs on campus. And so we asked the question, we said, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate the current impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on your well-being? And this was a sliding scale, like they could literally move this on this continuum. So you'll see on 10 on the far right, thriving, doing great. On the other opposite side of that spectrum, 0-1 in crisis, kind of disabling, distress, loss of function, having a hard time, a really hard time. This is where people fell on the spectrum. We had 325 people respond to this question, again, faculty and staff. There's a mix. And you can see, I kind of bolded the 1 through 7, which is where I consider when you get to that 7, kind of going into that survival mode, I think is when we really need to start paying attention. 50% were 7 or below. So I think that is kind of profound insight into what our employees are feeling like right now. And again, this is very recent data. We collected this data in September. So this is very fresh. Before I move on, I'm going to let Kevin jump in, but are there any questions about this data or initial reactions? I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Okay.
Somebody want to add something? I was just going to say the numbers when you're showing the prevalence rates, when you looked at 29% were experiencing depression or anxiety. And that's similar to what you see in the general population. So in a given year, about 15% of the US population will have significant depression episodes. And then another 15% will have some kind of anxiety related issues, whether it's just panic attacks or just feeling anxious throughout the day that's hard to manage. So really, I know that the numbers you were saying were alarming, and they are, but because that's reflective of also the general population. So UCA is, I would say, is fairly good cross section of what we see in the population. So
I love that comment. Yeah. For me, I think it's because where I'm coming from in my perspective, that's my job. I want to take care of all my faculty and staff. And so it kind of hits my heart a little bit when I see those numbers. But yes, I do think that UCA is kind of a mini version of the real world, and our numbers truly reflect that. Mm-hmm. And I guess just underscores the fact that we're all human. We're here to do a job, but we're all human beings, and we're all here and interacting and trying to make it through what has been a really tough couple of years. So Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll present your slides. You just kind of prompt me, but I'll get to your first one. Okay. There you go.
Yeah, and just a little bit about my background. I've been teaching here since 1992, so I may have been here longer than some of you are old, right? But anyway, my background is I'm a counseling psychologist, and I am a licensed psychologist and been involved a lot with disaster relief the past 20 years, been working with the Red Cross quite a bit, doing a lot of disaster work. And then more recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with refugees, mainly from the Middle East, and been traveling to the Middle East quite a bit, but also working with refugees in the US as well. And so a lot of the work that we do is certainly crisis oriented and trauma related, but still deal with anxiety, depression, stress, all these things that we deal with. Those are the things that we would deal with through the Red Cross or through working with refugees. And so what I'm presenting is sort of a condensed version that is teaching people who work as volunteers in disasters or who work with refugees. It's kind of giving them a basic tool to just listen to people's stories and then find out how to get help. And the Red Cross and other disaster relief agencies take this model that's called psychological first aid, and it's actually 8 or 9 different steps. And what I've done is condense that down into what I think are just 3 fundamental questions, and it seems to be helpful. So we don't all have to be licensed counselors, licensed psychologists, mental health professionals to do this. Think of this as really having a conversation with somebody that you have some concerns about, and think of it as simply having a coffee conversation or something like that. So this is not formal by any means. This is just a way to help think, how can I sort of move through this time with this person and help get them to what I call the next best step. And that's something I keep emphasizing with people, that as I hear and as I listen, and we do this out there in the disaster world, in the refugee world, it's as we listen to their stories and as we ask these basic questions, it's really then, how can I help strategize with you and work with you to come up with the next best step for you as you work through this issue or work through this crisis or whatever it may be. So I think this has good utility, and I think it's something we can all kind of hang on to. So think of a clock. Think that you have a certain amount of time to speak with somebody. Sometimes it might be, in a fast-paced work environment, and somebody looks pretty upset, and you think you've got maybe 10 minutes that you can spend talking with them. Then your clock will have essentially about 10 minutes. Sometimes, though, you might be with a friend, or maybe have a longer period of time, maybe it's lunch or something, and now maybe you've got 30 minutes to spend with someone talking about the issue. And I use a clock face just to think of allocating about 1/3 of the time for each of these questions. And the reason I put a kind of a time frame on it is because if you've ever had someone come to you in a crisis and they're really distressed and they're really in a crisis, we get pulled into that crisis, right? And we find our heart rate going up, our breathing going up, feeling kind of anxious. And what drives that, it drives us to this need to want to fix it right away, to calm everything down. And if we rush through this, we might not really get enough good information to get to that next best step. So this is just a way of kind of slowing down, not feeling rushed or in a panic to try to fix the problem, but to be able to listen well and get as good an understanding as you can get in whatever time frame that you have to work with them. Does that make sense? And by the way, feel free to ask questions as we go along. So this is very much a dialogue. So it's not a lecture, and there's not going to be a test afterward, right, Mariah? So the first question is, someone comes to you and maybe they're sharing with you that maybe you notice that this person is really upset, visibly upset, or really stressed out about something. And if you ask the question, hey, how are you doing? You look like you're upset. Would you like to talk? And then what we're doing is we're listening to the story. And so the person will tell us sometimes in great detail, sometimes just kind of sketchy, but we hear their story. And then based on that is where I start thinking, now, what are my 3 questions that I can ask? So when you hear the story and you get a sense of what's going on, then the first question is, how is this affecting you now? And what I want to know is what kind of disruption is it causing you? Obviously, you're upset, and obviously, you're wanting to talk about this thing. So the first question is just, how is it affecting you? It's in terms of your work, or in terms of just home life, family. Could be sleep problems, appetite problems, and you don't have to be super specific, but just listen to that. How is it affecting you now? And just listen to how they're doing that. And again, if you've got, let's say we've got 15 minutes to work with them, spend about 5 minutes or so. Now, this is not exact. We're obviously not looking at our watch, right? So, okay, I've got another 30 seconds, and we're going to shift. But the reason, again, I put a little bit of time frame on this is because I don't want you to get in a hurry. It's okay to slow down and say, how is this affecting you? And listen to what they're telling you. And maybe even ask, is it, how about sleeping or appetite? Is it also bothering you to that level? So it's okay to ask those questions. You're not being super nosy with that. In fact, most people, when you ask those kinds of questions, they perceive that as you really trying to be helpful and that you really are interested. And then as you hear that, then the next question is, well, what have you been doing to try to cope with this? How are you managing this is really what we're wanting to know. And here people will say, well, I've been trying to do this. I've been trying to work out more. I've been trying to walk more. I've been trying to pray more, or I've talked to my family about it, but it's just not getting better. They may, mention lots of things. We try things to help alleviate the situation as much as we can, but after a while, sometimes it just, things aren't working anymore. And so I'll ask, well, how helpful has it been? If you're saying that you've been talking with your family, you've been trying to exercise more, how is that working for you? So again, just take that 5-minute time frame and just listen to how they're managing. And I'll also ask, again, that's the psychologist in me, but it's okay for you guys to ask, what's working for you and what's not working well for you? Are you doing things that are not really helpful? Because a lot of times in our default mode, we get into some bad habits, right? Like I don't know how you guys are when you get stressed out, but when I start to get stressed, I like to eat. And when I was 20, that was okay. But now at my age, it's not okay, right? And if I start to get stressed out, I want something semi-sweet, not real sweet, semi-sweet, and coffee. Well, that doesn't help much of anything, right? But that's kind of my default mode. But other people, and again, depends how close you are, other people, they may even say, well, I started drinking more, or, I've noticed that I'm letting things slide. I'm not taking care of business very well. So sometimes people will give us a little more information there. And then once you hear that, then we hear, how's it affecting them? What are they trying to do to manage, and what they're doing that's doing okay, but what they're trying to manage that's not doing okay. And then the last section, the last 5 minutes is to say, well, let's think, given what you've telling me, what what do you think the next best step for you will be to help get through this problem or this issue? And how can I help you with that? And so then we work together. It's a collaboration. And certainly you guys know on campus, as Mariah was saying, we have the EAP, the employee assistance. And I guess is that time limit or session limited? Like to get so many sessions for that, Mariah?
Yes, it is. You can, typically it's up to 10.
Okay. Oh, 10. So that's quite a bit. A lot of EAPs like 3 or 4 or 5. So that's good. Is that with counseling center staff or is that another agency contracted?
That's a great question. And this is part of the session, right? So I'm glad you asked. So UAMS has an Arkansas employee assistance program that different state agencies contract with. And so
Okay.
we've contracted with them and their providers.
Okay, good. So that may be a possibility. I think, is the counseling center still seeing faculty and staff or not?
They are not. They do serve as a crisis resource. They're
Yeah.
happy to do that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. I utilize
not-
them quite frequently for consulting.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
different
yeah.
issues.
Okay.
But yeah, we do, and I'll talk about this at the end. So we have our
Okay,
EAP.
okay. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We also do have really good like mental health insurance coverage, and I'll touch on that at the end
Yeah.
as well.
Okay, good. Great. Okay. Yeah. So that's part of it. It's just working with the person and saying, how can I help you take this next step? And sometimes people are reluctant to make a call to schedule counseling or to go, sometimes we can kind of partner with them and say, hey, I'll go with you, or I'll help you make that call. So as you listen to this, as you understand the story, how it's affecting them, and then what they're doing to try to cope, then you've got a more targeted sense of what the next step needs to be. If we rush through the first 2 sets of questions, a lot of times we're just sort of shooting in the dark and hoping we hit something that's going to work. But the more we can use that time slot, again, we have to kind of estimate the time slot, but if I've got 15 minutes, the more I can use of that 15 minutes, at least 10 or 12 of that, gathering this information, then when we start talking about what's the next best step, we seem to have more of a focus, a better idea of where we need to go. And so I've seen this time and time again, even in crisis situations where we've been out with tornadoes and hurricanes and things, and people are, homes are destroyed and all that. This model works pretty well because if I can slow down, if I can be calm and kind of pace through it, it helps the person I'm with, begin to calm down and begin to feel like, okay, I can't imagine what to do for the next 6 months if my home has been destroyed. That's too overwhelming. But I can think about the next step. And for a lot of people, just getting the momentum going, just beginning to take that first step towards resolution is really big in gaining some momentum and increases the likelihood that they'll continue through that. So that's my brief model. And the next slide, just real quickly. It's just some tips about listening and advising. Be calm, be patient as you can, be attentive, and that helps them to calm down. They want to lean on you, kind of ground with you. So try to stay calm as you can, and resist that need to fix it. When people come to us with problems and issues, they may have a big hole in them. It's not our job to fix it, but maybe by listening to them and helping them get to the next best step, I'm adding one layer into that to fill that up. So, so we can add just one layer of recovery or restoration or help in that. And certainly be respectful, compassionate, non-judgmental with people, because all of us struggle at different times with different things. And accept your limitations. We're not all counselors and therapists and mental health professionals. But that's okay. The fact that you're listening, willing to listen, willing to try to understand, and willing to try to get help is huge. That's a lot, because research does show that when people feel like they have social support, whether it's family or friends, coworkers, when they feel that, their confidence in getting through the problem increases significantly. So just adding that layer, being willing to listen, even though you're not the professional, really does matter. It matters a lot. And then I always tell my students this, do what you know to do. You're not a professional. Even if you were, you do what you know to do and trust that it's enough for that moment and leave it in the room. What I tell my students is that don't carry that session home with you and start, what if, I should have done this, I should have done that. Trust that you've done what you knew to do in that moment, and that's enough. And so you guys, if you're helping a friend and you're talking, sometimes we get away from that thinking, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. Just trust that what you've done in the moment is what you needed to do and what you needed to be for them at that time. And then let it go as best you can. And then check up with them, next day or 2 days later, if you see them or whatever, give them a call, or if they're a coworker, just check in and say, hey, how are you doing? I've just been thinking about you and want to know how things are going for you. Okay, so that's really my quick section there.
I love those. I love actionable steps and takeaways. I do want to circle back because it does, it all relates into those next steps. What are the next steps? I do want to share a little bit more specific information about our EAP, and then we can open it up for some dialogue here. So again, just a reminder, all benefits eligible employees and their family members are eligible to participate in EAP. It's confidential, short-term counseling and mental health support. There's no cost. There's appointments here in Conway, in Little Rock, and then also you can do a phone or a telehealth visit. They're very flexible. And I've listed a website for more information, and we'll share these slides out to everybody in attendance today as well. And then I did mention this, people that don't want to utilize EAP, they'd rather use a provider of their choice. I just wanted to highlight some of our insurance benefits. So for mental health services on the point of service plan, which is our most popular insurance plan at UCA, that's most of our employees are on this plan. Outpatient mental health services, which includes things like counseling, therapy, would be $20 and then covered 100%. So you have that $20 copay, but then 100%. And of course, my disclaimer is always check your coverage before you go, make sure it's an in-network provider, do all the due diligence before you go so you don't get hit with a big bill. We don't want that to happen. But I just wanted to point that out. If $20 is in your budget, that's much more affordable than paying out of pocket for a counseling or therapy session. So
and that's very good mental health coverage, because a lot of coverage is typical is like 50% coverage. So
yes, it is by far the best mental health coverage I have ever had at an employer. So definitely worth highlighting. I included the consumer-driven health plan just for comparison. Again, most people are on the point of service plan, but it's going to be higher because of that, the deductible, that out-of-pocket cost. This is for 2021. I have not laid eyes on our summary plan document for 2022. I have not heard about this changing. But again, just a disclaimer to check your coverage when that year rolls over, just to make sure you're good before you go for that visit. So I'm gonna stop share. That way I'm on a laptop, so that way I can see everybody, and then we can open it up for additional questions and dialogue. Okay, see there. That's everybody. So we'd love to open it up for reactions, questions. Again, hypotheticals. We don't want to name any names, but are there situations that you've come across or are dealing with on a regular basis? We'd love to talk those out. Having Kevin here is awesome. We can kind of troubleshoot and pick his brain a little bit. So feel free, jump in. Does anybody have anything? I can tell it's Friday.
Laura, do you think it would be helpful if I stopped recording at this point?
That's possible if that's a great question. Yes. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we want to capture in the recording before we stop. Yeah, we can certainly do that. I love that idea. Before we stop, are there any questions about the data that I shared? Someone asked me directly if I could share that data with the rest of campus. I'll share these slides, but if you want to get with me, we can do that. I'll also be sharing this with the executive staff as well. I do think it's worth them having eyes on it as well. Now that we've got this data gathered, I think it's great to take a look at it and share it. So yeah, I'm not keeping it. It can be disseminated. Okay, so Vicki, I don't see anything. So for those of you watching, we're going to stop recording, but you can follow up with any questions. Go ahead, Vicki, you can stop.